So, on this occasion, we speak essentially about ourselves, but we base it on the Sikha from Rebbe, on the Pasha of the week. The Pasha of the week, everyone knows, is Pasha's BeHaalosschah. And this is the mitzvah to Aaron HaKohen, that Hashem told Moshe to tell Aaron BeHaalosschah HaNeiros, which simply means when you will kindle the lights, you should light them in a certain way, the wick should be pointing towards the center. But there is a unique choice of words over here. It says BeHaalosschah. The word for kindling in Lashon Kodesh is hadloka, right? What bracha do we say hadlik ner Chanukah, not lehalos ner Chanukah? Hadlik ner Chanukah. And here it says BeHaalosschah. BeHaalosschah means you will raise up. You will raise up. So Rashi right away says that the BeHaalosschah is telling Aaron that when he kindles the lights, he has to kindle them in such a way that ultimately they will burn on their own. They will continue to rise up like fire rises up. Continue to rise up on their own. They will not need to be continually maintained. Now clearly, this is speaking in a simple sense, it's speaking about lighting the candles. But when you light a physical candle, the minute you apply fire to it, it kicks in, it catches fire, and then it burns. And the flame automatically burns, just like in the first candle. These candles, however, represent another type of candle, another type of lights. As a matter of fact, Rashi says that this pasha over here came to appease Aaron. Did you remember that? Because Aaron felt very dejected that when all the korbanos of the Nisim brought, and he didn't participate in Chanukas and Mizbeach. So Hashem came to appease him and says, what you are doing is greater than what they are, all of them did. And what is it? Because you raise up the candles. What neiros are we talking about? So the Rebbe explained, as he explained in Chassidus, that these neiros, the neiros of the menorah represent the Jewish people. As a matter of fact, if you will see, if you look in the Haftorah, it talks that there's also the Neila Zechariah, it says, it talks about the Jewish people. The Jewish neshamas are called neiros, Neravai Nishna Sodom. You heard about this expression, supposedly. And there are 7 neiros. Why are they 7? Because there are 7 midos, 7 spheres. And the neshamas, although they're all holy neshamas, but every neshama has a special connection, a special root in one of the 7 midos. Not all neshamas are identical. They're all completely dedicated, completely one with Hashem, but in different ways. There's a neshama that is that tends towards Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and so forth. 7 different midas, 7 different qualities. And each one of these 7 has its unique purpose, its unique quality, and they all have to be kindled to the point where they burn when they rise up on their own. BeHaalosschah, when they rise up on their own. So this is all, so to speak, terminology from Hasidus, from Kabbalah, but then there is a most important side to it, that actually this is speaking to each one of us, every Yid. And we will try to approach it slowly and get the full picture. We have a Torah, and the Torah is presented to us in a presentable manner that we can read it, translate it, and understand what it says. At that level, just to understand what it says, there is no difference between what one understands, what the other understands. We are going to repeat the words of the Torah. Like Dabra, it says, will there be a difference between one Eid or another Eid, how he reads these words? It's perfectly identical. There's no difference. In other words, that part of Torah that we are simply learning and interpreting and understanding what it says on the simple, superficial face level, there's no difference between one and another. Where are the differences? And we start understanding them on a deeper level. What is a deeper level? The deeper level is that, in fact, the understanding of Torah, the understanding of Yiddishkeit in general, is not something only that you learn from someone else, that somebody tells you, and you just repeat what he says. This is something that actually is rooted in the very soul of each one of us. Even though we are not capable, and we never will, we have to have the Torah that should open up the soul, should tell us what the insight that we have. But ultimately, when we learn Torah, when we think about Yiddishkeit, this is something which ultimately has to connect to us on a personal level. I will elaborate in a moment. Starting from the very first Yid, I mentioned it not long ago, Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, as we all know, Avraham Avinu, he was born at a time when the whole world was saturated with idol worship. Completely submerged and drowning in idol worship. Okay, this is important. If anybody doesn't understand something that is said, please stop, because the intent of the Hillel you should understand, not that I should just say, talk haletzim va'avonim, right? Steeped in Avodah Zarah. How that happened is a separate story, but that's what happened. And Avraham Avinu was first introduced to Avodah Zarah. to the point where his father insisted on it. This is the thing. And Avraham, the Gemara says, Ben Gimel, at age 3, he already began to realize something doesn't make sense over here. This cannot be the real thing. How did he realize? Like the Rambam says, he didn't have a teacher, he didn't have anyone showing him the way. What made him realize that this is something not right, there's something wrong with this? This was something that he realized personally, from his personal insight. In other words, there is a very big distance between what one can learn and repeat words and say, oh, I understand what you were saying, and then he reflects in his own mind and says, okay, do I really see it? Do I really understand this? Does it touch me? This is a totally different world. And I want to discuss this a little bit more in detail. These are not novel things which you've learned in Tanya, that every neshama, every yid has 10 koiches, starting from Chochmah, Bina, V'das, and then going into Midas and so forth. So, I don't know to what extent and what degree of depth you've learned this in Yonim and Tanya, but I'll briefly repeat it, so to speak, lay it out. We have to understand that every human being has an initial recognize, initial starting point, has an initial recognition of what reality is, what life is. I want to just simply demonstrate so we understand what we're talking about. Say you didn't learn anything, a person who never learned anything, and doesn't know how to put anything, so to speak, in perspective, in words, and explain where does the world come from, what does the world stand for, what is life about, doesn't know anything about it. He never learned it, he never thought about it. But he's a human being, and he's got his natural intellect. We ask ourselves a question, each one. When you think about yourself, you think about yourself and the cat. You look at the world, you look at the sunrise, you see the world, and the cat looks at the world. Do you think you see the same world? Do you think you see the same world as the cat sees? Excuse me? What's the answer? Yes?
Visually, maybe.
Visually. I mean, seeing means what you're seeing. What you're seeing with your mind's eye.
Total different perspective.
Do you think you're seeing the same thing?
No, they're smarter.
Let me say again. We're not thinking with our personal intellect. We are thinking externally. The first thing that a human being recognizes, oh, here's a cup. Whose cup is it? Whose cup is it? It's just there. Does a cat ask the same question, whose cup is it?
No.
Why not? What's the principle? What's the simple principle behind it? To a human being, it has to make sense. It's not just there. He has to make sense. What is it about? Where did it come from? What is it doing here? Even such a simple thing as a cup on the table. When you open your eyes and you see a whole world, an infinity. You know, if you ever thought about it, an infinity. The sunrise in the morning and going around in a circle and giving and warming up and giving light, and everything wakes up and then everything goes to sleep, and it's an infinite. There's oceans and there's rivers and there's mountains and there's creeks, all kind of, a whole beyond anything that a human being can imagine. An ice cap on the north, an ice cap on the south. It's mind-boggling what's going on. What does he see? He sees there's something going on. Something that really, so to speak, arouses this curiosity. I want to know. I want to relate to it. What is the reality of it? Why does this is? I'm taking for granted that everybody recognizes that there's no way that the cat sees the world the same way as a human being sees. Even if you never thought about it, but if you're forced to think about it, for a moment, you right away see there's no comparison. It's not the same world. It's not the same world. We have to see the world the way a human being sees the world. This is what Hashem gave us an neshama for. This is why Hashem gave us intellect for. So that when we start learning, Reishis Bora Elokim Deshmayim V'Ha'aretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We say, yeah, this kind of heaven and earth had to be created by something very, very special. This is not just heaven and earth that happens on its own. It makes sense. This is grand. This is something unusual. So when you learn, it makes sense. It finds a place in your mind. This is called Chokhmah. This is the initial wisdom with which a human being sees and recognizes everything. This Chokhmah, what I illustrated just from vision, this is just a first glance. But in reality, the depth that we are able to see is much, much deeper. And this is what learning is about, and what thinking is about, and his boinenus. I'm sure you've heard this terminology. The important point which I want to make is this. Where is this Chokhmah connected? How come a human being sees a different world than the cat? Why is that? He never learned, he didn't go to Cheder. Avraham Avinu, like the Rambam says, didn't have a Cheder. And everybody around him told him just the opposite. What is it that made him see differently? It is that he connected himself. He saw the world through his neshama. And his neshama, his human neshama, said to him, this is not it. It has to make sense. This is not just a meaningless world based on the powers of Avodah. Something grand, something living over here, something infinite. Until it took him a long time. The mother says it took him 40 years, 8 years, whatever it is, until he came to realization, to a clear view of what it is. This is what the Pasuk says. BeHaalosschah, when you kindle the lights, when you learn something, it's not enough that you learn, like what is different between you hold a fire to the candle, and the candle burns because the fire is kept at the candle. You take the fire out. So physically we know that the candle, if it has oil, it will continue to burn. If it does not continue to burn, that is because it doesn't have oil. In other words, it doesn't connect to any resource. It just burns out and finished. Just a wick. The seichel that we have, even the superficial seichel, when you learn something, that seichel has to connect to the oil. The oil, as I said in Chassidus, is this chokhmah. In other words, it has to connect to a resource. We have to try and understand it on a personal basis, not just to know what it says. To know what it says is identical to holding a fire to the candle. As long as somebody is holding a fire to the candle, it burns. As long as somebody is telling me what it says, and I can make sense, so to speak, logical sense. Oh, you're saying this, okay. I know what you're saying. This is all based on what somebody tells me. But this is step one, if that much. This has to immediately open up, and we have to immediately apply our own insight, our own seichel. Say, okay, what does it mean? What does it say? Bereshit bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz, like I mentioned before. And everybody learned Chumash, the first pasuk in Chumash. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So you could say this, and okay, that's what it says. I'm translating words. What does it mean? How does that change your view of the world? How does that change your own perspective on your own life? These are powerful words. What does it mean? You mean God created the world? I thought the world is just there. No, God created. Oh, really? What's that mean? We have to understand that the BeHaalosschah are made is that when you kindle the lights, when you learn Torah, it's not enough that you learn and you understand what is being said. You have to then open your own mind and see to it and see how it touches you and how it makes sense to you. This is the chokhmah, this is the touch of oil. And then, any little thing that you learned begins to rise up, makes a little flame, and makes a little light in your mind, a little light in your neshama. And it opens up more and more. Based on this type of learning, as I said before, if we are to learn, so to speak, by repetition, if we can only learn and repeat what somebody told us, then there will be no difference between one and another. Depending on how good a memory you have, that's how well you learn. It's nothing to do with your seichel, nothing to do with your neshama, nothing to do with your chokhmah, nothing to do with your inclination, with your midas, nothing. This is like computer learning, robotic. This is not called learning. they mentioned many times, and now coming from Matan Torah. Matan Torah, we mentioned it last week, or whatever it is, the last time we spoke. Matan Torah, it says that the Rebbe gave the Torah only after Yidden said, Nase v'nishma. Remember, I pointed out, everybody thinks that the principle of this Nase v'nishma is that the Rebbe wanted that Yidden should accept the Torah first. Nase, just accept it. We will do what you tell us to do. And then Hashem consented to give the Torah because Yidden were submissive. You know, submissive means so why don't you ask? Submissive means they gave in, they bent down and said, okay, you tell us what to do. That's all it is. And that's why Hashem gave us the Torah, because we were submissive. That's not the case. Because as I pointed out, if you look in the Chumash, before the Eden said Nase v'nishma, they said Nase by itself, just Nase. And know what? Twice. In Pashas Truma, in Pashas Yisrael, Eden says Kol Asher Dimar Hashem Nase. In Pashas Mishpotim, said Kol Asher Dimar Hashem Nase. And that did not get in the Torah. So it's not just submissive, not just saying, okay, I'll do what you tell me, leave me alone. That didn't give the Torah. What gave us the Torah? When we said, Nase v'nishma. Yes, the first step has to be Nase, but ultimately, why is the first step Nase? Because the only way to come to Nishma, the only way to really understand, you have to first open your mind and mind. But ultimately, we have to learn with our whole mind, with our seichel, with our heart, with our neshama, so that the shalheves is oil me'eleh, so that the flame begins to warm us up. It has to become our own learning, not something. Oh, you make me learn. You tell me to do it, so I'll do it. That's not learning Torah. That's only a distant beginning, if that much. Even at the time when we said Nase, Hashem said that at the same time I want to have Nishma. That the intent in this is that you will ultimately bring your neshama out. And Nishma means you will understand. You will bring your life into it. Otherwise, other able to need to give Torah to robots. What's the point? The Neshamas, they bring Hashem into the world. They can really elevate and transform the world. You know that throughout our history, and we have a very long history. We have 3,500 years history since Matan Torah, if no more. And then we go back hundreds of years before that. Throughout our history, starting from Avraham Avinu, the Gemara says, Asora Nisyonis Nisnas Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was tested with 10 Nisyonis. And you all know that Nisyonis of Avraham Avinu were really paramount Nisyonis, or powerful Nisyonis. The last one of which was the Akedah. Take your son, put him on the altar. Which just boggles the mind. What is Nisyonis for? Okay, so you say Avraham Avinu, the first one who had to establish certain precedent, but then going all the way down, Yitzchok and Yankov, you all know, and the Shvatim, and then we were in Mitzrayim, and then we came out of Mitzrayim, and we were Nisyonis throughout, and then we have Nisyonis throughout our history. Every one of us, we know what we are going through. The whole Golus is one huge history of the Jewish people. And just in the previous century, we suffered the most devastating, cruel onslaught on our people than there ever was. And we are supposed to go through all of this and then emerge, come out and start rebuilding. We built up a whole world of yeshivas and everything, and all of a sudden it's all destroyed and we start all over again. And all over again, and all over again. This happened many times in history. What's the point? The point of all nisyonos is to bring out, to force out, to bring out from within the Jew his depth. What is going on in his mind behind the surface? As long as everything is good, fine. You tell me I should say this, say this, say this, say this. What's the problem? Why not? But that's not the meaning of Shaheres Oil Me'ilel. There's a fire coming out from inside, from our own oil, our own Chokhmah. The Shoynes are all meant, and they force out, they actually accomplish the singing, bring out the depth, bring out the Neshama Vayi. When, in fact, our learning Torah and our Kima Mitzvahs, our understanding and our connection to Yiddishkeit, connection to Hashem, is with that, in that level, using our inner koiches, using our own chokhmah, our own bina, our own koiches, to try to understand it on our own, personally, not just to repeat what is learned. Then that's when we can start seeing there's a difference. There's 7 different general paths, general branches in this world. There are Eden that have this type of tendency, this type of tendency. This is because it touches their real soul. They're not just repeating what they learn. Like it says that the Shama and BeHaalosschah, I'm sure this is something which is very common, everybody knows. The Shama and BeHaalosschah, there were these 2 great yeshivas, 2 great schools of learning, and they had many differences in halacha between them. And generally speaking, BeHaalosschah tended in the Kav HaChesed, and BeShama tended in the Kav HaGvura. Why did they tend like this? And the halacha was on BeHaalosschah. Why did BeShama continue to argue? BeHaalosschah, the halacha, let them have it. Why do I need to say what I say? The answer is that this is in common. This is our obligation. This is what learning Torah is. Everything we have to learn as a personal understanding. To bring it a little bit closer to home. Okay, this is basically the message in the BeHaalosschah and Neiros, that there are 7 Neiros, and therefore there are differences, and the fact that one understands it a little different than the other, this is the way it should be, this is the way it's always going to be, and on the contrary, this is when Torah comes to life. This is when you learn, when you know that you're learning with your own mind. And when you learn with your own mind, this is the only guarantee, the only thing that assures that when you close the book and you go outside of the yeshiva, you will still have the flame burning. The flame is not going to be dependent on being here and having the book in front of you. The flame is going to burn because it's burning on your own oil, on your own fuel. This is what carries us through when we go out. And we're not going to say, oh, it's too difficult. Oh, it's too difficult. Well, I didn't know that it's going to be so. Is it real or is it not real? Is this your neshama? Is this your mind or is it not your mind? Believe me, nobody can escape missions. There's no way. Everybody has their difficulties, their missions. Everybody has to make their decisions as they go on in life. And these decisions will be based and will be formed by the degree of depth and insight and personal commitment that you acquire here in Yeshiva. If what you learned touched you personally, and for one moment you saw, yes, I really believe this. This is really true. This really makes sense in my mind. Then you know it's going to carry you through. This is the flame that gets kindled here in Yeshiva has to be burning on its own. So under all circumstances, it's going to continue to burn. Just to take a case in point, I don't know exactly how much time you have to, you're spending learning the chitas. The chitas these days in Tanya is Shara Yichud V'Emunah. Shara Yichud V'Emunah, the Alter Rebbe says in the Hagdama that the pure belief and recognition of the oneness of Hashem, this is the fundamental principle upon which all mitzvahs are based. Now, one that we should understand what that means. We live in such a world that everything has been corrupted. And it is very easy to dismiss Torah mitzvahs which people do. It's a tradition. This is the way Jews do it. It's traditional. It's not important, it's traditional. This attitude, it's not important, it's not really something that has to do with your neshama, with your life. It's traditional. So this is what destroyed Yiddishkeit for many, many thousands of people. They started compromising. This is not important. Oh, Pesach Seder, that's a tradition. So what do you do at Pesach Seder? You take your car, you go together, you get together by together the whole family, and you sit there, and who knows what else you do. As long as it seems traditional, this is Yiddishkeit. We should know that this is not what Yiddishkeit is. It's true that there are minhagim. You all know there's minhagim. But the minhagim go on top of the halacha. Not that the whole Yiddishkeit is minhagim. This is not just a tradition. There's this whole really Dvar Hashem. This is from Hashem. The Bereshis Bo Elokim et Hashemayim is the one who created the world, the one who took us out of Mitzrayim. He's the one who gave us the mitzvahs. And this is a real thing. And unless we get a sense of this reality, we are always going to be vulnerable. This is important. This becomes less important. I personally, I've seen through my Eden. Just a simple thing. You would say, it's not such a serious thing. They skip mincha davening. It's in the middle of a business day. It says like in Aloch, it says that Mincha is one of the most difficult, is a real nisoyin, because in the middle of business day, in the middle of a meeting or whatever it is, and you have to interrupt without Mincha, it's called a difficult moment. But whatever, with a Babishing Imam, a Yiddu non Chassidus would ever think of missing Mincha because he's in the middle of a meeting, it wouldn't even come up in his mind. That's only if you understand that Mincha is a din in Shulchan Aruch. The same Rebbeinu Shalom who said you should keep Shabbos said you should have Mincha, and there's no question about it. And if by accident you forgot Mincha, it becomes a very painful thing. You can't really take it that easily. And these, it's as if it's not that important. There is a story of the Rebbe Rashab. Rebbe Rashab, he was a child, and they had some kind of a food, a candy or something, some kind of a child's food. And the Rebbe, he was a child, he didn't know what bracha to make on it. He had an older sister, so he asked her, what bracha do you make on this? And she told him, whatever it is. She told him to make the bracha. So he made the bracha and he ate it. Then afterwards, he found out that this was the wrong bracha. Now I'm telling you, he's talking mamash, a little child. This was the wrong bracha. So he came up to his sister and he said, this was the wrong bracha. So she said to him, it's not that important. So he got all upset. It's not that important. It's damn important. What do you mean it's not that important? So there's a story a little further which I don't want to mention at this moment. But I just want to point out, if we understand the meaning of Torah personally, then things are able to carry through. We are different, with different madrigas, with not all the Rebbe Rashabs. we are whatever we are at our level, but it's meaningful. And we can carry through, we can stand up to all the missions. So we're learning, as I said, we're learning Shayachad V'Emunah. Shayachad V'Emunah is a deep learning, and it requires real thinking to understand the logic portion, what the Alter Rebbe says. But after all that, you have to understand. The Alter Rebbe is explaining in Shayachad V'Emunah and showing logically the oneness of God, and showing logically how the world exists only by a godly presence at this very moment. Not that, like we said before, not that God created it once and then it stays on its own, but he actually, the presence of the world is actually representing of God's presence. This is the meaning from, the Alter Rebbe said, this is the meaning from Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem Kol HaChosel Boyd. So when you say Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem Kol HaChosel Boyd, it makes sense. Hashem Echad. What's Hashem Echad? So now in learning Hashem Echad, it doesn't make sense. It's like Hashem Echad. And you understand that the whole world represents Hashem's kingdom. So to whatever degree one understands this, it is very important to understand. The Alter Rebbe said, this is the basis of all mitzvahs. This is the basis of Yiddishkeit. We have to utilize the moment and say, hey, at some moment in time, it has to make sense to me that the world doesn't exist on its own. It exists only because Hashem creates it. Not created it, but creates it. So even if I don't understand it fully, but it has to make sense. This is what I'm learning. We have to bring to bear, just like I said originally, when a cat looks at the world and a human being looks at the world, you're seeing different worlds. The human being sees the world, hey, there is meaning to it. Where is it coming from? What's maintaining it? What's keeping going? This is what Avraham Avinu asked. What's keeping the world going? This is a question that is natural to every intelligent person. So this is the principle over here. Shadei shall have us oil me'elah. Again, here in Yeshiva, this is a special opportunity that every one of us gets. This is not going to last forever. And while the fire is hot and it's kindling and touching your candle, open up your mind, open up your heart, and allow the oil, the inner oil of your neshama, to be touched, to follow, so to speak, follow this wick, just like oil follows, runs up a wick. Then you will see that you understand something thoroughly and someone else understands something thoroughly, and you're different. You have a different tendency, and it won't bother you. And it's not going to be any kind of questions. Yeah, we both understand it. And then, in order to know what to do practically, look in the Shulchan Aruch. Neither one of us are going to make decisions on our own, but we understand it. We have to make sense of it. We live with it. Just like you're Avram Mayorov, you're Avram Drizin. I don't know if you... Drizin, yeah, the father of the Drizins, the grandfather. He was a Chassid Shalid and used to verbring a lot. So he said, bread, in order bread should feed you, you have to put it in your mouth, chew it up, digest it, and allow it to go integrate in your system. If you take bread and take a whole bunch of loaves of bread, tie it around your belly, it's not going to give you any. It's not going to give you any sustenance. It's not going to do anything. You have bread, and you can boast, I have bread, but you don't have anything. This is the same thing when you learn, and you just tie it up, so to speak, and you have it, and I have it, but it didn't permeate, it didn't get digested. It didn't get chewed up, it didn't get digested, it didn't get integrated in my system, in my thought process. Then it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything.
How do you allow it to do it? To digest?
To do what?
How do you allow that? I mean, how do you make yourself digest the food? Digest the oil,
So that's what I explained to you before. You have to try and relate to what you're learning personally.
Just relate personally?
Yeah. And you're able to. That's the hope. That's why I gave you the emotion of the cat. Every time you start thinking about it, say, yeah, of course. I see it differently. You wake up and say, hey, there's a reality. There's a human intellect that Rabbi gave you. And this is the intellect that's supposed to bring life into your life. That way, when you are faced with the challenges, you have a reality. You have a sense of reality, you have a sense of life, and you know what this is about. Every time you go through a day, a week, a month, something has to happen to your own intellect. What did I learn? There's a story in Rabbi Maharash. Rabbi Maharash was visiting Petersburg. In those days, Petersburg dates back to Petersburg. He was learning there for a while. It was the seat of the kings. It was the capital. It was a wealthy place. And Yidden, generally speaking, were not allowed to live in these cities. But merchants, special artisans, special people who were needed for the economy, they were permitted. So there was a Yid, a Chassidish Achosi, who lived in Petersburg. He was a wealthy person. I don't know exactly what he was, a merchant or whatever. He was a wealthy person. He was permitted to live there. And of course, his family, his children, all grew up in Petersburg. Petersburg, in those days, was like Manhattan today. In other words, he lived in a modern society. It wasn't as decadent as Manhattan, but it was by standard of those days, it was a decadent, decadence, decayed, rotten. It wasn't as low as we have it today, but it was by standard of those days. Gabi Libavitch, it was really far away from what. Anyway, so this man was a Chosi, and his children all grew up in there, and they learned, and they also learned other things. They were educated. So this man brought his son to Rabbi Maharash and introduced him to Rabbi. And he said that this son of mine, he already learned out the whole Tanya. That's a Jewish and Yiddish expression, uzgelernt. In other words, he learned out the whole Tanya. He finished the whole Tanya. He learned out the whole Tanya. It's an expression. So the Rebbe Maharash says, no, he learned out the whole Tanya, so what did Tanya teach him? In Yiddish, this was a play on the same word. If anybody knows Yiddish, he said to him, er hat ausgelernt dem ganzen Tanya. So the Rebbe asked him, no, was hat Tanya ausgelernt? Anybody catch this? In Yiddish, learning and teaching is the same word. The same word. You learn, I learned, and ich lerne miten. I'm teaching him is also called learning. So he says, he learned the whole Tanya. So it means he taught the whole Tanya. What did Tanya teach him? This is the important thing. The important thing is, what did the Tanya teach you? In other words, how learning Tanya changed your view, or opened up, not changed, because the Neshama shows you everything. But you don't know what you're looking at. By learning Tanya, it begins to make sense. You know what you're looking at. There's nothing novel. The Neshama that he knows, sees the truth, by the way. But he doesn't know how to make sense of it. Because he doesn't know how to make sense of it, it gets lost in the Avodah Zorah, so to speak, in the world. But if you learn Tanya, the Tanya teaches you how to make sense of what you see, and you really can relate to it. So in conclusion, as we usually do, we all pray and we wish, we hope that each one of us should allow his candle to be kindled and open up his wick so that the wick will not be resistant to the oil coming from the Neshama. There are all kinds of wicks. In Neshama it says, you may have learned in the Mishnah, there are different kind of wicks that you're allowed to light candles Shabbos. Not allowed because the oil doesn't go through them. There have to be an open wick that allows the oil to flow through. The intellect should live, and we should allow ourselves to be touched by what we know.
Amen.
And this mission will carry us through a successful life and a blessed life and a happy life. That's what it's all about.